Chapter 1. The Scarlet Tribunal. The chains bit into Evangeline's wrists as the hooded figures dragged her through corridors that smelled of ancient stone and something sweeter, something that made her stomach turn. Blood. Centuries of it, soaked into the very foundations of this place. She'd hunted vampires for 3 years. 17 confirmed kills, each one a monster that had torn families apart, left children orphaned, villages emptied. She'd been good at it, the best in her order. They called her the Silver Daughter, for the blessed daggers she wielded with lethal precision. Now those daggers were gone, and she was the prey. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that stole her breath despite her terror. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow, held aloft by columns carved with scenes of carnage and ecstasy intertwined. Hundreds of candles flickered in iron sconces, their light dancing across faces too beautiful to be human. Vampires, perhaps 60 of them, arranged in a semicircle around a raised dais of black marble. And on that dais sat 7 thrones. 6 were occupied by creatures of such terrible beauty that Evangeline's eyes watered to look at them. Ancient things, dressed in velvets and silks that whispered of centuries past. Their eyes glowed like coals in the candlelight. Amber, crimson, violet. The 7th throne stood empty. "Kneel before the council of eternal night," one of her captors hissed, forcing her to her knees. The stone floor was cold beneath her, slick with something she refused to name. A woman rose from the center throne, her gown the color of fresh arterial spray. When she smiled, her fangs caught the light like pearls. "Evangeline Ashford, the Silver Daughter. How delicious that you finally graced us with your presence." Evangeline lifted her chin, ignoring the trembling in her limbs. "If you're going to kill me, spare me the theatrics." Laughter rippled through the assembled vampires, a sound like breaking glass. "Kill you?" The woman descended the dais with inhuman grace, circling Evangeline like a cat with a wounded bird. "Child, if we wanted you dead, we would have drained you in your bed months ago. No, you're here because of what you are, what you've always been, though you've hidden it so cleverly, even from yourself." Ice slid down Evangeline's spine. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Liar." The word cracked like a whip. The vampire woman leaned close, breathing in deeply. "I can smell it in your blood. The old magic, the binding gift. You carry the bloodline of the covenant makers, girl. The last of your cursed line." The words made no sense, yet something deep within Evangeline stirred, a recognition she couldn't name. "My family were hunters. We've killed your kind for generations. Because your ancestors broke the ancient covenant." Another vampire stood, his voice booming. "They bound themselves to our kind through sacred ritual, bore the mark that would allow peace between our races. Then they betrayed that bond, turned to slaughter, and the gift passed dormant through your bloodline, until you." Evangeline shook her head violently. "No! You're lying! You're monsters!" "Silence!" The woman's hand shot out, gripping Evangeline's face with crushing strength. "You will listen. The prophecy is clear. The last covenant maker will either forge a new bond with the strongest of our kind, uniting our worlds once more, or their death will cement eternal war. And we are tired of war, little huntress. So very tired." She released Evangeline, who gasped for breath, tasting blood where fangs had grazed her lips. "The decision is not yours to make," came a new voice, deep, resonant, carrying the weight of centuries. Every vampire in the chamber stiffened. Some bowed. Others dropped to their knees. Evangeline turned toward the sound. He emerged from the shadows beyond the empty throne like darkness given form. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the lethal grace of a predator who'd never known defeat. His hair was black as a raven's wing, falling past his shoulders. His face could have been carved by a master sculptor. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that promised both cruelty and terrible beauty, and eyes. God's, his eyes. They burned like molten silver, ancient and fierce, fixing on her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. He wore black leather and armor that spoke of battlefields long forgotten, a crimson cloak flowing behind him. At his side hung a sword that seemed to drink the light. "Lord Draven," the woman breathed, and there was genuine fear in her voice now. "We did not expect—" "Did you not?" His gaze never left Evangeline as he ascended the dais, claiming the seventh throne. "You summon the last covenant maker, speak of binding her to our kind, and think I would not sense the ripple in the old magic." He leaned forward, silver eyes narrowing. "She is not yours to claim." The chamber erupted in protest, but he silenced it with a single raised hand. "The girl has hunted us, killed our young. She deserves nothing but what I decree." Draven's voice dropped to something deadly soft. "I am the blood sovereign, the first turned, the eldest among you, and I claim right of covenant by ancient law." Evangeline's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't want any part of your covenant. I'd rather die than bind myself to a monster." Something flickered in those silver eyes. Amusement? Anger? Brave words from a woman in chains? He rose, descending the dais with movements too fluid to be natural. The other vampires parted before him like water. He stopped before Evangeline, towering over her kneeling form. "Tell me, Huntress, how many of us have you killed?" She met his gaze, refusing to look away. 17. "And how many of those 17 had slaughtered innocents?" The question caught her off guard. "All of them. I only hunt those who break our laws." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Who feed without consent, who turn mortals against their will, who terrorize rather than coexist." He crouched before her, bringing them eye to eye. "You've been doing our work for us, Silver Daughter, culling the mad ones, the young fools who cannot control their hunger, and for that I will not let them destroy you." His hand shot out, faster than thought, and the chains on her wrists shattered like glass. Evangeline stumbled forward, caught by hands that were cold as marble, yet somehow gentle. He lifted her to her feet, then turned to face the council, keeping her behind the protection of his body. "The prophecy speaks of binding, not slavery, of covenant, not chains." His voice resonated through the chamber. "She will not be forced, she will not be broken, and any who touch her without my permission will answer to me with their immortal lives." He turned back to Evangeline, and in a movement that sent shockwaves through the assembly, he knelt before her, took her scarred, calloused hand in his own, and lifted it to his cold lips. "I am Draven Ashcroft, blood sovereign, first of the turned, lord of the eternal night, and I offer you a choice. Evangeline of the Silver Daggers, stand with me. Let me show you the truth of what you are, what your bloodline truly meant before hatred corrupted it. Give me 1 month to prove that not all of us are the monsters you believe we are." His silver eyes held hers, and she saw something there she hadn't expected. Loneliness, deep as oceans, old as mountains. "And if I refuse? Then I will personally escort you from this place, return your weapons, and ensure your safe passage. But know this, war is coming. The mad ones grow in number, and you, whether you accept it or not, are the key to preventing the bloodshed of thousands, mortal and immortal alike." Evangeline's mind raced. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, a seduction, a monster's lies. But something else whispered beneath her fear. A pull she'd felt in dreams she couldn't remember. A recognition that made no sense. 1 month, she heard herself say, but I keep my weapons, and if you give me reason to use them, blood sovereign or not, I will end you. The smile that curved his lips was genuine this time, fierce and approving. I would expect nothing less. He rose, pulling her with him, and turned to face the stunned assembly. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. "The covenant begins tonight. Any who challenge it, challenge me." He pulled Evangeline closer, his arm around her waist, possessive and protective at once. "Now, bow to your future queen." The chamber erupted into chaos, and Evangeline realized she'd just stepped into a world far more dangerous than any hunt she'd ever undertaken. Chapter 2. The Sanctuary of Shadows. Draven's private chambers existed in a part of the fortress Evangeline suspected few were permitted to see. He'd led her through corridors that seemed to fold in on themselves, past doorways that shimmered like heat mirages, until they arrived at a massive door carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Protection wards, he explained, noting her wince. Against those who would enter uninvited. Your bloodline mark will allow you passage, but it may sting at first. He wasn't wrong. Crossing the threshold felt like walking through a waterfall of ice and electricity. Evangeline gasped, stumbling, and found herself caught once more in those impossibly strong arms. Steady. His voice rumbled against her ear. The ancient magic recognizes you, but it's been dormant in your blood for generations. It needs time to remember. She pulled away as soon as she could stand, putting distance between them. The rooms beyond were nothing like she'd expected. No coffins, no torture devices, no bones scattered artfully across stone floors. Instead, she found herself in what could only be called a sanctuary. The main chamber soared 3 stories high, lined with shelves that held thousands of books. Their leather bindings gleamed in the light of a fireplace large enough to stand in. Comfortable chairs clustered near the hearth, worn with use. Tables held stacks of papers, inkwells, quills that looked both ancient and well-maintained. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined one wall, currently shuttered with heavy velvet curtains, the color of midnight. Through gaps in the fabric, she could see the sky beginning to lighten. Dawn approaching. You read, she said stupidly, then wanted to kick herself. Draven moved past her, shrugging off his cloak and draping it over a chair. Beneath, he wore a simple black shirt that did nothing to hide the warrior's build beneath. I've had 800 years to cultivate hobbies, Huntress. Reading barely scratches the surface. 800 years. The number made her dizzy. He gestured to a doorway partially hidden behind a bookshelf. Your chambers are through there. Private, warded, with a bolt on the inside that even I cannot break. You'll find clothes, bathing facilities, everything you need. The wards prevent anyone from entering without your explicit invitation. Evangeline studied him warily. Why? Why what? Why give me safe haven? Why claim covenant before your entire council? I've killed your kind. You should want me dead, not... She gestured helplessly between them. Whatever this is. Draven was silent for a long moment, his silver eyes fixed on the fire. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. Do you know why I was called to that chamber tonight, Evangeline? Why I, who have not attended a council gathering in over a century, suddenly appeared. She shook her head. Because I felt it. He turned to her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. The moment they brought you into this fortress, the moment your blood crossed the threshold, I felt the old magic wake. It sang through my veins like lightning, like recognition, like... He stopped, himself, jaw clenching. The covenant bond is not something we choose lightly. It's written in blood and soul, older than any of us. And it's pulling at me even now, demanding I protect you, demanding I... He cut himself off abruptly, turning away. Demanding you what? Claim you. The words were barely a whisper. Bind you. Make you mine in every way that matters. He laughed, a bitter sound. But I've lived too long, seen too much, to trust instinct over choice. So yes, I offer you sanctuary. Time to understand what you are before making a decision that will echo through eternity. Evangeline's hand moved unconsciously to her throat, where her pulse beat too fast. And if the bond is wrong? If it's just vampire magic trying to trick me? Then we part ways peacefully. He met her eyes again. But I don't think it's wrong, Silver Daughter. I think your ancestors felt exactly this pull before they forged the first covenant, before fear corrupted it into hatred. A clock somewhere in the room chimed softly. Draven glanced toward the windows, where golden light was beginning to seep through the curtain edges. Dawn comes. I must retreat to the inner chambers during daylight hours. He moved toward a door she hadn't noticed, cunningly built into the bookshelves. Rest, Evangeline. When night falls again, we'll begin your education. There's much you need to learn about your bloodline, about what the covenant makers truly were. Wait. The word escaped before she could stop it. He paused, hand on the door. Does sunlight really burn me to ash? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Not exactly. I'm old enough that sunlight causes pain rather than destruction, but it's not pleasant and it weakens me significantly. Better to avoid it altogether. His expression turned serious. The younger ones, though, those with less than 2 centuries, they would indeed burn. Remember that, should you need to defend yourself. The casual way he gave her that information, a weapon against his own kind, struck her silent. Sleep well, Huntress, and try not to stake any of my people while I'm indisposed. It creates such tedious paperwork. Then he was gone, the door closing silently behind him. Evangeline stood alone in the sanctuary of shadows, exhausted and overwhelmed. Her weapons were still missing. She was trapped in a vampire fortress, claimed by a creature who'd lived 8 centuries, bound by magic she didn't understand to a destiny she'd never wanted. And yet when he'd knelt before her, when he'd looked at her with those ancient silver eyes, she'd felt something stir in her chest. Not fear, not hatred, recognition. She moved toward the chambers he'd indicated, finding them exactly as promised. Beautifully appointed, with a 4-poster bed draped in silks, a bathing room with a copper tub large enough to swim in, and wardrobes filled with gowns in deep jewel tones. On the bed lay her weapons, every single one. Her silver daggers, her blessed stakes, her crossbow with its supply of sanctified bolts. A note rested atop them in elegant script. Trust must be earned. Keep these close. You may need them before this month is through. Evangeline picked up one of her daggers, testing its familiar weight. The silver was still pure, still deadly to vampire kind. He'd returned her weapons, given her the means to kill him, even as he claimed covenant and protection over her. What kind of monster did that? Or perhaps the better question, what if he wasn't a monster at all? She stripped off her torn hunting leathers, discovering bruises she didn't remember getting. The copper tub filled with steaming water at the turn of an ornate tap, some kind of heating system built into the ancient fortress. She sank into it gratefully, letting the heat soothe her aching muscles. But even as exhaustion pulled at her, her mind wouldn't quiet. The last covenant maker will either forge a new bond with the strongest of our kind, uniting our worlds once more, or their death will cement eternal war. Her grandmother had spoken of the old days, before she died. Whispered stories of the first Ashfords, who walked between worlds, who could sense vampire magic, who served as bridges between mortal and immortal. Evangeline had thought them fairy tales, but lying in that bath, in a vampire lord's sanctuary, with the pull of something ancient singing softly in her blood, she wondered if every word had been true. And if so, what did that make her? Dawnlight filtered through even the interior chambers, casting everything in soft gold. Evangeline dried herself, dressed in a simple shift she found in the wardrobe, and collapsed into the bed with a dagger beneath her pillow. Just before sleep claimed her, she could have sworn she felt something, a presence, watchful and protective, like a guardian standing just beyond her door. Drevin, she realized, even weakened by daylight, even separated by walls and wards, he was keeping watch, protecting her. Whether from others or from himself, she couldn't yet say. Chapter 3. Blood Memory. Rising. Evangeline woke to twilight and the scent of jasmine. For a disoriented moment, she thought herself back in her grandmother's cottage, where jasmine grew wild along the garden walls. Then she opened her eyes to silk canopies and Gothic architecture, and reality crashed back. Vampire fortress, blood covenant, an 800-year-old lord who looked at her like she was simultaneously savior and damnation. She sat up, finding a tray on the bedside table that hadn't been there before. Fresh bread still warm from the oven, cheese, fruit, and a pot of tea that steamed gently. A note in that same elegant script. You slept through the day. Understandable, given the evening's excitement. Join me in the library when you're ready. There's much to show you. Wear the green gown. It will help with what comes next. D. Evangeline eyed the note suspiciously. Help with what? But her stomach growled, and she found herself eating the simple meal with more hunger than she'd expected. Everything was fresh, perfectly prepared. Where did vampires source human food in a fortress like this? The wardrobes held dozens of gowns, but only one in green, a deep emerald silk that shimmered like water. No corset, thankfully, but it laced up the back in a way that required contortions she barely managed. The neckline was modest enough, though it left her collarbones and throat exposed in a way that made her uncomfortably aware of the pulse beating there. She braided her dark hair over one shoulder, then strapped her daggers to her thighs beneath the gown skirts. The weight was comforting, familiar. Whatever Draven wanted to show her, she'd be ready. The main chamber was empty when she emerged, but candlelight flickered from deeper within the library. She followed it past shelves of ancient tomes, past maps that showed countries with names she didn't recognize, past portraits of people in clothing from centuries past. She found Draven in an alcove she hadn't noticed before, standing before a table covered in objects. He changed from his battle attire into simpler clothes, dark trousers and a shirt of deep crimson, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His black hair was tied back, revealing the sharp lines of his face. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression shifted. The green suits you. It brings out the gold in your eyes. Evangeline fought down an unexpected flush. Your note said it would help. Help with what? Instead of answering directly, he gestured to the table. These belong to your ancestors, the original covenant makers. I've kept them safe for, well, longer than I care to calculate. She moved closer, studying the collection. A silver chalice etched with symbols similar to those on Draven's door. A dagger with a blade that seemed to shift between colors, now steel, now something that resembled glass. A leather journal, its pages yellowed with age, and a piece of jewelry, a pendant on a delicate chain, the stone within swirling with iridescent light. The green gown, Draven continued, is woven with threads of silver and blessed herbs. It will help ground you when the blood memories activate. Blood memories? He picked up the pendant carefully, letting it dangle from his fingers. The covenant makers didn't just broker peace between mortals and vampires. They could see our memories, walk through our past, understand our nature at the deepest level. It's how they knew which of us were safe to trust and which were monsters in truth. His silver eyes met hers. The gift passes through blood. Touch an object that carries vampire essence, and you'll see the moments soaked into it. Feel the emotions, understand the truth behind the blood. Evangeline's mouth went dry. And this pendant was mine. I gave it to the first covenant maker, a woman named Alara Ashford, 600 years ago. She wore it during the ceremony that created the original treaty. It's saturated with my essence, my history, He paused. My truth. You want me to see your memories. It wasn't a question. I want you to understand what I am. Not the legends your order taught you, not the stories whispered in fear. The reality. He held out the pendant. If you can bear it. Blood memories can be overwhelming, especially for those newly awakened to the gift. Evangeline stared at the swirling pendant, her heart hammering. This could be a trap. Could be designed to manipulate her, to show her crafted lies disguised as truth. Or it could be exactly what he said, a chance to see past 800 years of propaganda and fear. She reached out, her fingers brushing his as she took the pendant. The world exploded into light and shadow. She was falling, no, flying, through darkness, pierced by stars that weren't stars at all, but moments in time, memories crystallized into pinpricks of light. The pendant burned cold against her palm, and then she was in it, experiencing rather than watching. A battlefield at night, the stench of death overwhelming. Draven, knelt beside a dying soldier, a boy barely old enough to shave. Please, the boy whispered through blood-frothed lips, don't let me die here, alone. The choice hung heavy. To turn him meant condemning him to an immortal hunger. To let him die meant watching another innocent life extinguished in a pointless war. "I'm sorry," Draven whispered, and gave the boy the mercy of a quick, painless death. Then sat with him through his last moments, holding his hand so he wouldn't be alone after all. The memory shifted. A village burning. Screams piercing the night. Draven moved through the flames like an avenging angel, tearing apart the vampire who'd slaughtered indiscriminately. "You break our laws!" His voice was thunder. "We are not animals. We are not—" But the mad vampire only laughed, blood dripping from his fangs, and Draven had to end it. Had to destroy one of his own kind to protect the mortals cowering in their homes. Shift again. A woman, Ilara Ashford, standing before him in a moonlit garden. "I don't believe you're monsters. Not all of you. Help me bridge the divide. Help me create peace." Draven had looked at her with the same intensity he now looked at Evangeline. "You ask the impossible. Then we'll achieve the impossible together." And they had. The pendant formed from a stone Ilara had worn since childhood, fused with a drop of Draven's blood, becoming a symbol of their covenant, of trust earned through action, not demanded through force. The memories came faster now, centuries of them. Draven protecting villages from rogue vampires. Draven mediating disputes between mortal and immortal. Draven standing alone in empty rooms, the weight of eternity pressing down on shoulders that had carried it for too long. Draven watching Ilara grow old, watching her die, watching her descendants slowly forget the covenant and turn to hatred. His loneliness was an ocean, vast and crushing. And then, a final memory, just hours old, standing in shadow, sensing her enter the fortress, the covenant magic igniting like wildfire in his blood. Recognition so profound it hurt, not just her bloodline, not just the ancient gift, her. After 800 years, he'd whispered to the empty air, "Fate gives me this? A huntress who hates everything I am? The cruelty of it is almost poetic." But beneath the bitter words, hope stirred. Fragile, desperate. "Don't let me destroy this," he'd prayed to gods he no longer believed in. "Please, let me be worthy of this second chance." Evangeline gasped, dropping the pendant as she stumbled backward. Draven caught her, his cold hand steadying her as the world spun. The green gown had done its job. She was shaken but not shattered, grounded but not overwhelmed. "Easy," he murmured. "Breathe. Let it settle." She looked up at him, seeing him truly for the first time. Not a monster, not a lord, just a being who'd carried 8 centuries of burden, who'd tried to be better than his nature demanded, who'd protected even those who would destroy him, who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd stopped daring to ask. "You've been alone so long," she whispered. Something flickered in his silver eyes. Pain quickly shuddered. Immortality without connection is just an extended death sentence. The covenant. Understanding bloomed. It wasn't just about peace between species. It was about companionship, about covenant makers giving your kind something to... She struggled for the word. "To live for," he finished softly. Ilara understood that even immortals need anchor points, need reasons to remain civilized, to hold to honor rather than surrender to hunger. The covenant makers were those anchors, partners, friends, sometimes lovers, bound by choice and magic, reminding us we were more than predators. And when we turned to hunting instead, many of my kind gave up, became the monsters your order now kills. His expression turned grim. "I cannot fault you for killing them, Evangeline. They're already dead inside. You just make it official." She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart race. The blood memories had shown her truth, but they'd also shown her the thread of connection between them. The covenant magic recognizing her as it had recognized Ilara centuries ago, recognizing her as his. "I need air," she managed. "I need to... the garden." He gestured toward a door she hadn't noticed. "Warded, private, safe. Go, I'll wait here." She fled, pushing through the door into a hidden courtyard that shouldn't exist within a fortress of stone. But there it was, a Gothic garden under the stars, with night-blooming flowers filling the air with perfume. A fountain trickled softly in the center, the water casting dancing shadows across climbing roses and midnight jasmine. Evangeline sank onto a stone bench, trying to process everything. The memories still echoed in her mind, his loneliness, his honor, his desperate hope, and beneath it all, the covenant bond pulling at her like a tide, demanding she return to him, demanding she accept what fate had written in blood and magic. But was it fate or manipulation? "You're thinking too hard." Draven's voice came from the doorway. "I can practically hear your mind spinning from here." "You said you'd wait inside." "I said I'd wait. I didn't specify where." He moved into the garden but kept his distance, respecting her space. "Ask me, whatever question is tearing you apart. How do I know the memories were real? That you didn't show me carefully selected moments to manipulate me?" "You don't," he said simply. "Blood memories can be falsified by those with enough power and skill. But," he held up a hand as she started to protest, "that pendant holds 600 years of my essence. To falsify that much history across that many moments with that much emotional depth, it would require more power than I possess, more power than any vampire possesses. But it's possible. Technically, yes. Practically, no." He leaned against a column, moonlight silvering his dark hair. "If you want certainty, Evangeline, I cannot give it to you. Trust is not built on proof. It's built on choices, made repeatedly, until the weight of accumulated evidence becomes undeniable. And if I choose wrong, then we both suffer." His silver eyes found hers across the garden. "But I'd rather suffer honestly than live a lie of certainty." A night bird called from somewhere beyond the walls. The fountain whispered its endless song, and Evangeline felt the covenant bond humming between them, patient and inexorable. "1 month," she said finally. "You promised me 1 month to decide, to understand." "I did. Then teach me. Show me what the covenant makers were meant to be. Show me your world, not the propaganda version. And at the end," she took a shaky breath, "at the end, I'll give you my answer." Draven's expression was unreadable. Then he bowed, the gesture somehow managing to be both reverent and deeply personal. 1 month, Silver Daughter, and whatever you decide, I will honor it." But as he straightened, their eyes met, and Evangeline saw what he didn't say. "Please choose me. Please don't make me face another 800 years alone." She looked away first, her chest tight with emotions she had no name for. The garden suddenly felt too small, and the month ahead impossibly long. Chapter 4: The Crimson Binding. The nightmare came 3 nights later. Evangeline jolted awake, heart slamming against her ribs, the phantom sensation of teeth at her throat still burning. In the dream, she'd been running through endless corridors while something pursued her, something with silver eyes and hunger that felt like drowning. Except when it caught her, when those fangs finally pierced her. Skin. The terror had shifted into something else entirely, something she refused to name. She threw off the silk sheets, her shift clinging to sweat-dampened skin. The chambers were too warm, too close. She needed... The door between her rooms and Draven's library burst open. He stood framed in the doorway, his expression wild, hair loose around his shoulders. No shirt, just sleep trousers slung low on his hips, revealing carved muscle and pale skin marked with scars that shouldn't exist on an immortal body. "What's wrong?" His voice was rough, urgent. "I felt..." He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "The covenant bond. Your fear flooded through it. I thought someone had breached the wards." Evangeline pressed a hand to her racing heart. "Just a nightmare. I didn't mean to... I didn't know you could feel it. The bond strengthens each day you remain here." He stayed in the doorway, clearly fighting the instinct to come closer. "I should have warned you. Strong emotions bleed through. Fear, especially." "What else?" His expression shuddered. "It varies. Pain, certainly. Joy, sometimes. And..." He looked away. "Other things." Heat flooded her cheeks as she understood. Oh. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Draven finally cleared his throat. I'll ward your dreams. The old magic can be invasive when it's newly awakened. You're likely experiencing blood echoes, fragments of vampire memories carried through the covenant bond. You mean I was dreaming your memories? Possibly mine, possibly from the pendant. The lines blur. He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly exhausted, despite his immortal nature. This is why covenant makers trained from childhood. The gift requires control, boundaries. You're getting everything at once, unfiltered. Evangeline wrapped her arms around herself, feeling vulnerable in just the thin shift. In the dream, I was being hunted. But when it caught me, I wasn't afraid anymore. I wanted... She couldn't finish. Draven's silver eyes darkened to mercury. That wasn't just a blood echo, Evangeline. That was the bond showing you what it wants, what it demands. Sex? The word came out sharper than intended. Completion. He stepped fully into her chambers, moving with that predatory grace that reminded her what he was. The covenant bonds were traditionally sealed through blood and intimacy, not necessarily sexual, but profound connection. Physical, emotional, spiritual, the magic craves it. So this is just vampire manipulation? Magical coercion? No. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his skin. The bond draws compatible souls together, but it doesn't create desire where none exists. What you felt in that dream, what I feel whenever you're near, that's real. The bond simply removes the barriers that would normally keep us apart. Like the fact that you're a vampire and I'm a hunter? Precisely. His lips curved, without humor. Inconvenient, isn't it? She should step back, should maintain distance. Instead, she found herself studying the scars that crossed his chest, raised lines of silvered tissue that looked like old burns. How can you have scars? You said you heal. Holy fire, he said quietly. From a blessed blade, during the purge 300 years ago. I was protecting a group of mortal children who'd been caught in the crossfire between vampire factions. The wounds... He touched one absently. Some injuries run too deep, even for immortal flesh to fully forget. Her hand moved before she could stop it, fingers tracing the path of a scar that crossed his heart. His skin was cold, but not unpleasantly so, like marble warmed by moonlight. Draven went absolutely still beneath her touch. You saved mortal children, she whispered. I've failed to save far more than I've succeeded in protecting. His voice was rough. Don't make me a hero, Evangeline. I'm pragmatic, not noble. I keep the young ones alive because they're the future. Because if we kill all the mortals, we destroy ourselves in the process. But you care. She looked up, finding his silver eyes fixed on her with devastating intensity. The blood memories showed me. You don't just protect them strategically, you care. Caring, he said softly, is the most dangerous thing an immortal can do. The air between them felt charged, electric. Evangeline became acutely aware of how close they stood, of the rapid beat of her pulse, of the way his eyes tracked the movement of her throat when she swallowed. The bond is pulling again, she managed. I can feel it. Like recognizing like. His hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away, before his fingers brushed her cheek. Cold fire. Your blood calls to mine. Not as prey, but as completion. As if I've been a half-finished sentence for 8 centuries, and you're the words that make me whole. That's terrifying. Yes, but neither of them moved away. If we complete the bond, Evangeline heard herself ask, what happens, specifically? Draven's thumb traced her jawline, his touch careful, despite the hunger she could see building behind his civilized facade. We would need to perform the covenant ceremony. Blood exchange, witnessed by magic, if not by others. I would taste your essence, you would taste mine. The bond would seal, permanent and unbreakable. You would gain certain protections, my immortal healing, resistance to vampire compulsion, the ability to walk safely among my kind. And I... He stopped. What would you gain? An anchor. The words seemed dragged from someplace deep. A reason to remain civilized when the hunger grows too strong. A reminder that I'm more than the monster I could become. Covenant partners traditionally kept their vampires tethered to humanity. It's why the original treaties worked. So I'd become your keeper, your handler. You'd become my equal. His silver eyes blazed. The covenant makes partners, Evangeline. Not master and servant. You would have as much claim on me as I on you. Perhaps more. The thought should have repulsed her, should have triggered every instinct her order had trained into her. Instead, something in her chest tightened with what felt dangerously like want. Show me, she whispered. Show me what the blood exchange feels like, without the full ceremony, just a taste, so I understand what I'd be choosing. Draven's expression flickered between hunger and honor. That's not a small request. Even a partial exchange will affect you. Will affect us both. I know. She held his gaze. But I need to feel it, not just see it in memories. I need to understand with my body, not just my mind. He studied her for a long moment, searching for doubt or coercion. Finding neither, he nodded slowly. Not here. This requires ceremony. Respect for what it means. He held out his hand. Trust me? Evangeline looked at that outstretched hand, pale, scarred, capable of both terrible violence and careful tenderness. Then she placed her palm in his. I'm trying to. That's enough. He led her through the library to a section she hadn't yet explored. Behind a bookshelf that swung silently aside, a spiral staircase descended into darkness. But as Draven guided her down, torches flared to life with no visible flame, more of the old magic that permeated this place. They emerged into a chamber that stole her breath, a private sanctuary, circular and domed, its walls covered in murals depicting the history of the Covenant. She recognized Alara Ashford in several scenes, standing beside a younger version of Draven, both of them working together to heal rifts between their peoples. In the center of the room stood a stone altar, its surface carved with the same symbols as the pendant. Around it, a circle of candles waited, unlit. Every vampire lord maintains a covenant chamber, Draven explained, releasing her hand to light the candles with careful precision. Most haven't been used in centuries, not since the purges began. He finished the circle, the candlelight casting dancing shadows across the murals. This is sacred space. What happens here binds us to the magic itself, not just to each other. Evangeline's mouth went dry. Have you done this before? The blood exchange? Once, with Alara, when we first formed the covenant. His expression turned distant. It was different then. The bond didn't... He shook his head. What I feel with you is stronger than anything I experienced with her. The magic recognizes something between us that runs deeper than historical precedent. He moved to the altar, removing a ceremonial blade from a hidden compartment. The metal gleamed with an inner light, clearly more than simple steel. This is blessed silver, forged specifically for covenant ceremonies. It can cut immortal flesh without causing permanent harm, and mortal flesh without infection or poison. He turned to her. I'll cut my wrist first. You'll drink 3 drops, no more, or the transformation could begin prematurely. Then I'll do the same from yours. Just 3 drops? That's all the ritual requires for a taste, for a full bonding. His eyes darkened. That would require much more. From both of us. Heat pooled low in Evangeline's belly, accompanied by a hunger that had nothing to do with food. Draven noticed, his nostrils flaring. The bond affects us both. If you're feeling... I know what I'm feeling. She stepped forward into the circle of candlelight. Continue. He held her gaze for a moment longer, then brought the blade to his wrist with smooth precision. Dark blood welled, not the bright red of mortal blood, but something richer, deeper, like garnets made liquid. Come here. Evangeline moved closer, watching his blood drip onto the altar's carved surface. The symbols began to glow, responding to the offering. Cup your hand, Draven instructed. She obeyed, and he held his wrist over her palm, letting exactly 3 drops fall. They burned cold against her skin, swirling with that same dark luminescence. Drink. And as you do, open yourself to the bond. Let it show you what it wants you to see. Evangeline raised her cupped hand to her lips and drank. The effect was instantaneous. Power flooded through her veins like liquid starlight, cold and burning simultaneously. The covenant chamber disappeared, replaced by a cascade of sensation. Draven's hunger, ancient and vast, tempered by iron will. His loneliness, an ocean she could drown in. His hope, fragile and fierce, wrapped around her like armor. And beneath it all, desire. Not just physical, though that was there too, sharp enough to cut, but something deeper. A yearning for connection so profound it made her chest ache. He wanted her choice, her trust, her presence in his endless existence. Wanted to protect her, challenge her, know her in every way that mattered. And the bond was showing her exactly what that could mean. She gasped, stumbling, and found herself caught against his chest. The world still spun, but Draven's arms were solid, real, grounding her as the visions slowly faded. Easy, he murmured against her hair. Let it pass. First taste always hits hardest. That was... She couldn't find words. Overwhelming? His voice held dark amusement. Welcome to immortal existence. We feel everything at that intensity, all the time. It's why control matters so desperately. Evangeline pulled back enough to meet his eyes, seeing them blazing silver in the candlelight. Your turn. Evangeline? Fair is fair. You showed me what you feel. Now I'll show you. Whatever this is. She couldn't have named the emotions churning through her. Fear and fascination, desire and trepidation, curiosity and something dangerously close to tenderness. But she wanted him to feel it. Wanted him to understand that she wasn't unmoved, wasn't unaffected, that the bond was pulling her as surely as it pulled him. Draven's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Took her hand gently and brought her wrist to his lips. The blessed blade cut quick and shallow. She barely felt it, but when he sealed his mouth over the wound, when his tongue touched her blood, the bond flared like lightning. She felt him taste her, not just her blood, but her essence, herself, the core of who she was laid bare. Felt his shock at the purity of it, the strength running through her mortal veins. Felt his hunger spike, followed immediately by iron control slamming down. 3 drops, only 3. I will not take more. I will not. But she also felt something else, a realization that seemed to shatter something inside him. She doesn't fear me. Not truly, not anymore. Gods, I'm lost. He released her wrist with what looked like physical pain, stepping back so quickly he nearly blurred. His fangs were visible now, elegant, deadly, extended fully with hunger barely leashed. Enough. His voice was hoarse. That's enough for tonight. Evangeline touched her wrist, finding it already healed, accelerated by whatever magic the Covenant chamber held. You barely took anything. I took what I needed. He wouldn't meet her eyes. More would be dangerous, for both of us. Dangerous how? Because I would want to finish it. He finally looked at her, and the raw hunger in his expression made her breath catch. Complete the bond. Claim you properly, and you're not ready to choose that. Not yet. He was right. She knew he was right. But something in her, the bond, her own traitorous desire, wanted to close the distance between them anyway. Wanted to press against that cold strength and find out what completion truly meant. 1 month, she whispered, more to remind herself than him. 26 days remaining, he corrected, his hands clenched at his sides. Go back to your chambers, Evangeline, please, before I forget my honor entirely. She should go, should flee before the pull between them became irresistible. Instead, she stepped forward, rose on her toes, and pressed a kiss to his scarred cheek. His skin was cold as winter marble, and he went absolutely still beneath her touch. Thank you, she whispered against his skin, for showing me, for choosing honor. Then she did leave, hurrying up the spiral staircase before she could change her mind, her heart hammering and her blood singing with residual magic. Behind her, in the Covenant chamber, Draven stood frozen in the candlelight, one hand rising slowly to touch the place where her lips had brushed his skin. And for the first time in 800 years, he let himself hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he wouldn't face eternity alone after all. Chapter 5. Secrets in Blood and Ink. The library had become Evangeline's refuge over the following week. While Draven attended to his duties as Blood Sovereign, mediating disputes, enforcing vampire law, managing a network that apparently spanned continents, she explored the vast collection of texts he'd accumulated across centuries. What she found challenged everything she'd been taught. The official histories of her order painted vampires as mindless predators, corruption made flesh. But Draven's books told different stories, of the first vampires emerging during ancient plagues, created by desperate mortals seeking immortality to preserve knowledge before civilizations collapsed, of vampire scholars who'd preserved libraries while kingdoms burned, of immortal healers who'd shared their blood to cure incurable diseases, at great cost to themselves. Not all noble tales, certainly. There were plenty of monsters in these histories, too. Vampires who'd given in to bloodlust, who'd terrorized mortals for sport, who'd needed to be hunted down and destroyed by their own kind. But the picture was more complex than simple good versus evil. More human, despite their immortal nature. Finding anything interesting, Evangeline looked up from a journal written in elegant Latin to find Draven watching her from the doorway. He'd dressed formally tonight, black coat with silver embroidery, boots polished to a mirror shine. His hair was tied back, emphasizing the sharp planes of his face. "You speak 14 languages," she said instead of answering. 15 if you count several dead ones. He moved into the library, carrying a leather portfolio. Time provides ample opportunity for education, and when you're negotiating with vampires from different eras and regions, linguistic flexibility proves useful. "Is that where you were tonight? Negotiating?" "Mediating." He set the portfolio on the table beside her stack of books. Two young vampires decided to turn the same mortal without consent. Both claimed prior right. Both were idiots who should have asked the mortal in question what she wanted. "What did you do?" "Sent them to separate territories for a decade to cool off. Gave the newly turned woman a choice of which one, if either, she wanted as a mentor, and levied fines against both for breaking covenant law." His expression turned grim. 300 years ago, the resolution would have been a bloodbath. The covenant made negotiation possible. Without it, war, Evangeline finished. "Precisely." He gestured to the portfolio. "I brought you something. Materials that might help you understand the gift you carry." Curious, she untied the leather straps and opened it. Inside lay documents that looked impossibly old, some on vellum, others on parchment, a few on paper, so ancient it crumbled at the edges. All were written in the same flowing script. "Ilara's journals," Draven said quietly, "from her time as Covenant Maker. She documented everything, her training, her experiences, the techniques she developed for managing the gift." He touched one page gently, reverently. "I thought you might find them illuminating." Evangeline carefully lifted the top page, squinting at the faded ink. "I can't read. Old French." He pulled up a chair beside her. "Here, I'll translate." What followed was perhaps the strangest, most intimate evening of Evangeline's life. Draven sat close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his skin, reading aloud in a voice that turned the archaic prose into something alive. Ilara's personality shone through her writings, intelligent, curious, occasionally irreverent. Draven insists the blood visions cannot be controlled, only endured, one passage read. But I've discovered that meditation beforehand helps tremendously. If I center myself, visualize protective barriers, the memories wash over me rather than through me. I showed him my technique. He looked at me as if I'd worked a miracle. 800 years, he said, and a mortal teaches me something new about magic. I believe I've never seen him smile quite so genuinely. She was remarkable, Evangeline said softly. She was insufferable, Draven countered, but his tone was warm. Brilliant and stubborn and convinced she could fix everything through sheer force of will. He turned the page, but she wasn't wrong. She did fix a great deal. Made the covenant work when everyone said it was impossible. You loved her. It wasn't a question, but Draven considered it anyway. I cared for her deeply, but no, not romantic love. Ilara was... He struggled for words. A sister in spirit, perhaps, a partner in purpose. The bond between us was profound, but not possessive. Not like... He cut himself off. Not like what you feel with me. His silver eyes met hers, unflinching. No, not like that. The air between them thickened. Evangeline's pulse kicked up and she knew he could sense it, could probably hear her heart beating faster, smell the subtle change in her scent. The journals mention blood dreams, she said, forcing her attention back to the documents. But I don't understand what those are exactly. Shared dreaming through the covenant bond. Draven's voice roughened slightly. When the connection is strong enough, partners can walk through each other's dreams, experience them together, sometimes even shape them. It's... He cleared his throat. Intimate, to say the least. Have you been in my dreams? Beyond that first nightmare? No. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. I've kept myself walled off. Blood dreams require consent, and I won't invade your mind while you're vulnerable. But you could? The bond would allow it, yes. If you lowered your barriers and invited me in. He stared out at the night, his reflection ghostly in the glass. Ilara and I shared dreams occasionally, usually when we needed to communicate over distance or when one of us was in danger, but it was like talking in your sleep. Comfortable, familiar. And with me, it wouldn't be? He turned, and the hunger in his expression was carefully leashed, but unmistakable. With you, it would be fire. Your dreams already bleed through without intention. Fragments of desire, fear, wonder. If I entered them fully, if we shaped them together... He shook his head. That level of connection would make it nearly impossible to maintain the distance you need to make an informed choice. Evangeline should have been frightened by the implications. Instead, she found herself curious. What would it be like to dream with him? To explore the landscape of shared consciousness with someone who'd lived 8 centuries? Dangerous, her hunter training whispered. Seductive manipulation. But the blood memories had shown her truth. The covenant bond didn't lie, couldn't lie. If she entered his dreams, she would see him completely unguarded. Every thought, every desire, every hidden corner of his ancient soul. The question was, did she have the courage to let him see hers in return? Ilara's notes mention a technique, she said slowly, finding the passage and reading it aloud. For those newly awakened to the gift, shared dreaming can be practiced in stages. Begin with simply sensing each other's presence during sleep, then progress to sharing emotions, then images, then full immersion. This allows both partners to build tolerance for the intimacy gradually. She looked up. We could try. The first stage, just sensing each other. So I understand what it's like. Draven's hands curled around the window frame, his knuckles white. Evangeline, you said I need to understand the gift, all of it. She stood, moving toward him with determination she didn't entirely feel. If blood dreams are part of being a covenant maker, I should experience them. Safely, with controls, but still. This isn't about learning, he said quietly. This is about you wanting to understand what the bond could be, what we could be. Maybe. She stopped an arm's length away. Is that so wrong? No. He finally turned from the window. But it's dangerous, for both of us. Every connection we forge makes the bond stronger, makes it harder to walk away if you choose to. What if I don't want to walk away? The words hung in the air between them. Draven's eyes blazed. Don't say that unless you mean it. Don't give me hope. And then... He bit off the words, clearly fighting for control. Evangeline's heart ached at the desperation barely concealed beneath his carefully maintained composure. 800 years of loneliness. 800 years of watching mortals age and die. Of seeing covenant bonds shatter as the hunt intensified. Of facing eternity with no one who truly understood what that meant. "I don't know what I want yet," she admitted, "but I know I want to understand. Want to see the full picture before I decide. Is that fair?" Life is rarely fair. But he relaxed slightly. "However, I understand. And yes, we can try the first stage of blood dreaming, with conditions." "Which are?" "You sleep in your own chambers. I remain in mine. We simply lower our barriers enough to sense each other, nothing more. If either of us becomes uncomfortable, we raise the walls immediately." His gaze intensified. "And you understand that even this level of connection will affect you. Will make it harder to think of me as simply a vampire, simply the enemy. I already don't think of you that way. Then it will make it harder to think of me as anything other than..." He stopped himself again. "Then what?" "Mine," he breathed. "And I cannot afford to think of you as mine unless you choose it freely. The bond is already possessive enough without encouraging it further." Evangeline processed this, understanding the danger and the honesty in equal measure. "Tonight, then. We try the first stage." "You're certain?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." A smile ghosted across his lips, genuine, touched with dark humor. "Stubborn. Elara would have liked you." "Tell me more about her," Evangeline said, settling back into her chair. "If we're doing this, I want to understand what successful covenant partnerships look like." So he did. For the next several hours, as candlelight flickered and night deepened, Draven spoke of Elara Ashford, the first covenant maker, the woman who'd bridged worlds and forged impossible peace. His voice carried warmth when he spoke of her, and grief when he mentioned her eventual death at 72, surrounded by children and grandchildren who'd slowly forgotten what she'd built. "She made me promise," he said finally, "that if another covenant maker emerged, I would give them a true choice, would not bind them through manipulation or desperation, that I would trust them to see past the hatred and fear just as she had." His silver eyes found Evangeline's. "I'm keeping that promise, even when it costs me. And if I choose to walk away at the end of the month?" Pain flickered across his features, quickly hidden. "Then I will let you go. We'll ensure your safe passage. We'll even help you continue hunting the truly monstrous ones if you wish." He paused. "But I will not bond with another. The magic chooses once per lifetime, perhaps once per 8 lifetimes in my case. If you refuse, I face eternity unanchored." The weight of that responsibility should have felt crushing. Instead, Evangeline felt a strange sense of rightness, as if this impossible choice had been waiting for her all along. "Go to your chambers," Draven said softly. "Prepare for sleep. I'll meet you in dreams, Evangeline, and we'll see what truth the blood bond reveals." She gathered Elara's journals, holding them carefully. "Thank you for these, for your honesty, for..." She met his eyes. "For being worth the confusion." He laughed, short and surprised. "That might be the strangest compliment I've received in 8 centuries." "Then you're overdue for strange." She left him in the library, feeling his gaze follow her until she closed the door between their spaces. Her chambers welcomed her with familiar warmth. Silk sheets, jasmine-scented candles, the weapons she'd taken to keeping close out, of habit more than fear. Evangeline prepared for bed with unusual care, braiding her hair, washing her face, changing into a simple sleeping shift. All the while, her heart beat faster, anticipation and nervousness warring for dominance. She was about to invite a vampire into her dreams, into the most vulnerable spaces of her psyche. And she was doing it willingly. Either she was brave or insane, possibly both. She slipped beneath the silk sheets, extinguished the candles, and closed her eyes. Then, remembering Elara's notes, she centered herself, visualized her consciousness as a fortified space with walls she controlled. And in one of those walls, she opened a door. "Come find me," she thought into the darkness. "Show me what we could be." For a moment, nothing. Then, like starlight filtering through clouds, she felt him. A presence at the edge of her awareness, cool and ancient and carefully controlled. "Are you certain?" His voice resonated through the bond, not in her ears, but deeper. In her blood, her bones, her soul. "I'm certain," she answered. "Then let me in, Silver Daughter, and I'll show you what 800 years of loneliness looks like when hope finally returns." Evangeline lowered her walls and dreamed. Chapter 6. The Dreams We Share. The dream space formed between them like mist coalescing into architecture. Evangeline found herself standing in a garden that was and wasn't the one outside Draven's chambers. The roses bloomed impossibly large, their petals shifting between crimson and silver. The fountain's water ran with starlight rather than liquid, and the sky above held both moon and sun simultaneously, locked in eternal twilight. "Dream logic," Draven's voice came from behind her. "The subconscious doesn't follow natural laws." She turned to find him different here, less guarded, more present somehow. His silver eyes held galaxies, ancient and vast. When he moved, shadows trailed behind him like wings. "You look more yourself here," she said. "Dreams reveal what we hide while waking." He gestured to himself. "This is closer to what I am beneath the civilized facade. The predator, the ancient thing, the lonely one." The words came from her own lips, but she hadn't consciously formed them. Her unconscious mind was speaking, pulling truth from the bond. Draven's expression flickered. "Yes, that too." "Show me," Evangeline heard herself say. "Your loneliness. I need to feel it, not just see it in memories." "That's dangerous. You're mortal. You might not survive feeling 8 centuries of isolation." "Then filter it. Show me what you can." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded, extended his hand. When she took it, the dream space changed. She was standing on a cliff edge, waves crashing below. But the waves weren't water. They were time itself, flowing past in currents of years and decades and centuries. And she was alone, profoundly, achingly alone. She'd watch mortals live and die in the blink of an immortal eye, make connections that would inevitably shatter as age claimed her friends, while she remained unchanged. Learn to hold herself apart, to care less deeply, to protect herself from the constant grief of loss. "Immortality isn't eternal life," Draven's voice echoed around her. "It's eternal death in installments. Everything you love withers. Everyone you know becomes dust. You persist while the world turns stranger, and eventually you're an anachronism, a ghost haunting an era that forgot your name." The loneliness crashed over her in waves, not drowning, but eroding, wearing away the edges of self until she barely remembered what connection felt like. "Stop," she gasped. "I understand. The vision shattered. She was back in the twilight garden, held in Draven's arms as he supported her weight. His expression was anguished. "I warned you. Too much too fast." "No." Evangeline gripped his shoulders, grounding herself in his solid presence. "I needed that. Needed to understand what I'm asking you to risk if I refuse the bond. What another rejection would cost." "And now that you know?" She looked up into eyes that held millennia, and saw beneath the hunger and the hope the exhaustion of someone who'd carried too much for far too long. "Now I'm terrified of choosing wrong. Either way, someone suffers." "Then perhaps," Draven said softly, "you should stop thinking of it as a choice between suffering and happiness. Both paths hold both. The question is, which suffering, which happiness do you want to claim?" Before she could respond, the dream space rippled. A new presence pushed at the edges, something aggressive, invasive. Draven's expression turned feral. "Someone's trying to breach your dreams." "How is that possible? You said the wards. The wards protect against physical intrusion. This is psychic." He pulled her close, his body between her and the pressing darkness. "Someone with blood magic, trying to reach you through the covenant bond. Someone who knows what you are." The darkness took shape, a figure cloaked in shadow, eyes like burning coals. When it spoke, the voice was silk over razors. So the Blood Sovereign has found himself a pet covenant maker. How nostalgic. Draven's hands curled into claws, his fangs fully visible. Cassius, you dare breach my domain? Your domain? The figure laughed. The girl walks between worlds now, Draven. She's accessible to any with the power to reach her. And I have such power, such interest in her blood. Evangeline felt Draven gathering the dream space around them, reshaping it into a fortress. She's under my protection. Touch her and I'll end you. Will you? When ending me means war with the Eastern Covens, when it risks the fragile peace you've maintained for decades? Cassius circled them like a shark. The girl is the key to reshaping the Covenant laws. With her blood, we could bind mortals to us rather than bargaining, could return to the old ways when we ruled and they kneeled. The old ways nearly destroyed us all, Draven snarled, or made us strong, a matter of perspective. The shadow figure lunged, not at Draven, but at Evangeline. She screamed as cold pain lanced through her, feeling phantom teeth at her throat, drowning in hunger that wasn't her own. Draven's roar shook the dream space. He moved faster than thought, tearing Cassius away from her, his own darkness expanding to consume the intruder's presence. The two beings clashed in a maelstrom of power that felt like reality shattering. You do not touch her. Each word was punctuated by violence that sent cracked spiderwebbing through the dream. Cassius shrieked, his form dissolving under Draven's assault. This isn't over, Blood Sovereign. Others will come. She's too valuable to... Draven ripped the intruder's presence apart and banished the fragments beyond the dream's boundaries. Then he collapsed beside Evangeline, his form flickering. Are you hurt? He gasped. Did he... I'm okay. Shaken, but okay. She touched his face, finding it more solid here in the dream space than it ever was while waking. You use too much power. I can feel you fading. Worth it. He caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. I told you I would protect you. Even here, even in dreams, I meant it. Others will come, she whispered, echoing Cassius's threat. I'm not safe anymore, am I? You haven't been safe since they discovered what you are. His silver eyes burned with fierce determination. But I am not without resources, not without strength, and I will ensure that anyone who tries to take you answers to me first. The dream space was collapsing now, their connection severing as Draven's power depleted. Evangeline felt herself being pulled back toward waking, but she clung to him desperately. Don't leave me alone with this fear, please. I'm right here. His voice followed her through the dissolution, right through that door in the waking world, and I will guard you until dawn and beyond. You have my oath, Evangeline, my blood, my strength, my immortal existence. All of it stands between you and those who would harm you. Draven, sleep now. I'll keep watch. Evangeline woke with a gasp, sitting bolt upright in her bed. The chambers were still dark, candles long since guttered out, but she wasn't alone. Draven stood by the window, his form outlined in starlight. He'd kept his promise, hadn't left her vulnerable, hadn't retreated to his own rooms. You didn't have to stay, she said softly. Yes, he said, not turning. I did. She should have felt afraid, alone in the dark with a vampire whose power she'd just witnessed. Instead, she felt safer than she'd ever felt in her life. Come here, she heard herself say. He turned, and even in darkness she could see the hunger and honor warring in his expression. Evangeline, I'm not asking for anything more than presence, just don't stand so far away. He moved to her bedside, kneeling so they were eye level. His hand rose, hesitant, then touched her cheek with devastating gentleness. You unmake me, he whispered. Every moment with you, every connection we forge, you unmake 800 years of carefully built walls. And I find I don't care. Would tear them all down myself if it meant you'd choose to stay. I'm scared, she admitted, of choosing wrong, of condemning you to more loneliness or myself to a half-life as your anchor. Then be scared with me. He leaned his forehead against hers, the gesture achingly human. Be scared and confused and uncertain, but be those things here, where I can protect you, where the bond can show you truth. How much time remains? 18 days. So little time to make an impossible choice. Evangeline's hand found his, threading their fingers together. Warm, mortal flesh against cold, immortal marble. Stay until I sleep again. Please. Always, he breathed, and he did. Sat beside her bed like a guardian statue while she finally, gradually slipped back into dreams. This time, with his presence anchoring her, no nightmares came. No invasive presences breached her consciousness, just safety, and the slow, inexorable pull of a bond that wanted nothing more than for them to surrender to what they were always meant to be. Chapter 7. When Blood Calls. Blood. The attack came 3 nights later, swift and merciless. Evangeline had been alone in the library, researching protective words in Alara's journals, when the fortress's ancient alarms began to wail, a sound like dying angels that made her teeth ache. Draven materialized beside her with inhuman speed, his expression carved from stone. We're under siege. The Eastern Covens have moved faster than anticipated. Cassius? Leading them, undoubtedly. He pulled her toward the hidden corridor. I'm taking you to the deepest sanctuary. Wards there will hold even against coordinated assault. But they'd barely reached the spiral staircase when the wall exploded inward. 3 vampires poured through the breach, ancient things with eyes like coals and hunger like drowning. They moved in perfect coordination, clearly trained hunters rather than mindless beasts. Draven shoved Evangeline behind him, his darkness expanding to fill the corridor. You dare breach my home? We dare much more than that, Blood Sovereign. The lead vampire grinned, revealing fangs like daggers. Surrender the Covenant Maker and we'll leave peacefully. Refuse, and we take her over your ashes. Then prepare for ash, Draven growled. He moved like living death, his sword materializing in his hand as he engaged all 3 simultaneously. The corridor became a maelstrom of clashing blades and supernatural speed. Evangeline pressed against the wall, watching in horrified awe as Draven fought with a grace and brutality 800 years in the making. But 3 ancient vampires against even the Blood Sovereign. One broke through his defense, lunging for Evangeline with claws extended. She reacted on pure instinct, pulling the blessed silver dagger from beneath her skirts and driving it upward into the vampire's chest. The creature shrieked, dissolving into ash. The remaining 2 faltered, staring at her in shock. She killed Matthias, one breathed. A mortal, killed. She's no mere mortal, Draven snarled, using their distraction to separate the second vampire's head from its shoulders. She's mine. And you will learn that lesson in whatever hell awaits you. The final attacker fled, blurring away through the breach with Draven's roared warning chasing him. Tell Cassius I'm coming for him. Tell him to prepare his final defenses, and tell him that if he threatens her again, I will burn the Eastern Covens to bedrock. Silence fell, broken only by Evangeline's ragged breathing. Draven turned to her, his expression wild. Are you hurt? Did they... I'm fine. Shaken but fine. She looked at her dagger, still dusted with vampire ash. I killed one of them. You defended yourself brilliantly. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperation that spoke of how close the attack had come. Forgive me. I should have anticipated this, should have strengthened the outer wards. You can't predict everything. She leaned into his cold strength, finding comfort in the steady presence of him. But Draven, they'll come back. More of them. And next time I'll be ready. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. But they forced my hand. I can't leave you vulnerable while I deal with Cassius and his rebellion. The covenant bond must be completed, Evangeline. Tonight. Her heart stuttered. That's not how I wanted this choice made. Under duress, because of fear. It's not duress. His hands cupped her face, gentle despite the violence still lingering in his eyes. It's reality. You're in danger every moment the bond remains incomplete. My protection only extends so far without the full covenant sealing you as untouchable. And if I refuse, if I say I need more time, pain flickered across his features, then I will still protect you with my last breath, will still stand between you and those who would use you. But Evangeline, his voice dropped to something raw. It will kill me. Watching you remain vulnerable, knowing I could have anchored you safely. Please, don't make me face eternity wondering if I could have saved you from whatever fate awaits. She searched his expression, seeing the truth beneath the desperation. He wasn't manipulating her, wasn't using the attack as leverage. He was genuinely terrified of losing her, not as property, but as the answer to 800 years of loneliness. If we complete the bond, she said slowly, what happens to me? Specifically, you retain your mortality, your human lifespan, but you'll age far more slowly. 50 human years might pass as 25 for you. You'll gain my healing, my strength, resistance to compulsion, and most vampire magic. And, he hesitated, and? You'll be bound to me until death claims one of us. There's no severing a completed covenant bond. No walking away if you change your mind later. It's permanent, Evangeline. Eternal from my perspective, lifelong from yours. That's a heavy chain. It's not a chain at all. His silver eyes blazed. The bond makes equals, not prisoners. You would have as much claim on me as I on you, could compel me through it, could demand my presence, my protection, my honesty. I would be as bound as you. Could I compel you to release me if I regretted the choice? No. Because releasing you would mean your death. Without the bond's protection, the other covens would tear you apart to harvest your covenant-maker blood. The magic binding us is also what keeps you alive. His expression turned bleak. I will not pretend this is a choice without consequence. It's a cage, but one that keeps us both safer than the alternative. Evangeline closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible decisions. But beneath the fear, beneath the uncertainty, the covenant bond hummed with certainty. This was always where she was meant to be. How do we do it? The ceremony? Draven's entire being seemed to still. You're certain? No. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. But I'm choosing anyway. Because you're right, I'm not safe without it. And because... She took a shaky breath. Because I've spent these weeks getting to know you, seeing you, understanding you. And I don't want to walk away. Don't want to face my mortal life wondering what we could have been. Evangeline, don't make me repeat it. She managed a trembling smile. I'm terrified enough as it is. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers with aching tenderness. Then let me promise you this. I will spend every day of your extended life proving this choice was right. Will protect you, challenge you, value you as the gift you are. And when your mortal span finally ends, I will mourn you for the remaining centuries of my existence, carrying your memory as my most precious treasure. That's a depressing promise. It's an honest one. She laughed despite the fear, the sound slightly unhinged. Then take me to the covenant chamber, and let's finish what we started. The chamber waited as it had before, candles unlit, altar expectant. But this time, when Draven began the ritual, the air itself seemed to respond, humming with anticipation, with magic older than either of them. Kneel with me, he instructed, positioning them facing each other across the altar. The ceremony requires mutual vulnerability, mutual offering. We'll exchange blood, yes, but also truths. The bond will demand honesty before it seals. Evangeline knelt, her silk skirts pooling around her. The blessed blade gleamed between them. What truths? Whatever we've hidden, whatever we fear to reveal. His silver eyes held hers. The bond won't settle for half measures. It needs all of us, light and shadow, strength and weakness. Are you ready for me to see every corner of your soul? Are you ready for me to see yours? I've waited 800 years for someone brave enough to look. He took the blade, cutting his palm precisely. Dark blood welled, dripping onto the altar. The symbols began to glow. Ask me your truth, Evangeline, whatever you fear most about me. She watched his blood pool on the carved stone, feeling the weight of the moment. Then she asked the question that had haunted her since the blood memories. Have you ever killed an innocent? Someone who didn't deserve death? His jaw clenched, but he held her gaze. Yes. Once. A young woman during the turning frenzy in my first decade as vampire. I was newly made, barely civilized, and the hunger overwhelmed my control. I drained her before I fully understood what I was doing. She was 16, innocent in every way. Pain carved lines into his face. I've spent 8 centuries trying to atone for that single moment of weakness. It's why I'm so harsh with young vampires who can't control their hunger. Why I've killed dozens of our own kind who show the same murderous lack of control. I will not let her death be meaningless. The confession hung between them. Raw, honest, devastating. Evangeline took the blade, cutting her own palm. Her mortal blood joined his immortal essence on the altar. My truth, I enjoyed killing vampires. Not just the duty of it, but the satisfaction of ending creatures I believed were irredeemable monsters. I was good at it, and part of me liked being good at killing. She swallowed hard. Now I'm terrified that makes me as monstrous as the worst of your kind. It makes you human, Draven said softly. Flawed and complex and real, and I love you for it. The words hung in the air like chimes. What? She breathed. I love you. He said it again, clearer, accepting the truth as he spoke it. Not just the bond, not just the covenant magic. You, stubborn, fierce, honest, brave. You who sees my darkness and doesn't flinch. Who killed one of my kind tonight and then accepted this bond anyway. I love you, Evangeline Ashford. And whether you return that love or not, whether this bond is duty or choice for you, I will love you until my immortal existence ends. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You can't know that. We've only had weeks. I've had 8 centuries to learn what love feels like, and I know. His hand covered hers on the altar, their mingled blood sealing together. But I don't demand the same from you. Don't need you to say words you don't feel. I only need you here, choosing this bond, choosing life. That's enough. It's not enough, Evangeline heard herself say. Because I do love you. God's help me, I do. Not the bond's compulsion, not covenant magic, just you. The ancient, lonely, honorable creature who gave me choice even when it cost you. Who showed me truth instead of manipulation. Who spent centuries trying to atone for a single mistake because you refuse to be the monster others believe you are. His expression shattered into something between joy and anguish. Then say the words. Complete the bond. And let me spend your lifetime proving I'm worthy of that gift. She leaned forward, and so did he, until their bloodied palms pressed together and their lips met over the altar in a kiss that tasted of copper and eternity. The world exploded into light. The covenant bond slammed into place like a key turning in a lock, clicking home with finality that resonated through dimensions. Evangeline felt Draven flood into her consciousness, his immortal essence twining with her mortal spark until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began, and beneath it all, the covenant magic sealed them together with unbreakable bonds. 2 become 1, mortal and immortal, hunter and hunted, separate but unified, protected by ancient law and blood-sworn vow. Touch one and face both, harm one and destroy both. This is the covenant restored. This is the bond eternal. So it has been spoken. So it is sealed. They broke apart gasping. Both changed. Evangeline felt power coursing through her veins. Not vampire strength, but something else. The covenant maker gift fully awakened, amplified by Draven's ancient essence. She could sense vampires throughout the fortress, could feel the magic binding them to this place, could understand the complex web of alliances and enmities that made up Draven's world. And Draven, he looked at her with eyes that saw everything, his immortal existence finally anchored to something beyond duty and atonement. It's done, he whispered. It's done, she agreed. And somewhere beyond the fortress walls, in the eastern territories where Cassius plotted rebellion, the ancient vampire felt the covenant bond snap into place, felt his plans turn to ash, because the Blood Sovereign had found his equal, and together they were unstoppable. Chapter 8. Queen of Eternal Night. The transformation wasn't instantaneous, but it was profound. Evangeline woke the morning after the bonding ceremony feeling fundamentally different. Her senses had sharpened. She could hear heartbeats in distant chambers, smell the subtle differences between vampire and mortal blood, see in darkness that would have been impenetrable before. But more than physical changes, she felt connected. To Draven, yes, his presence was a constant hum in her consciousness, comforting and powerful. But also to the fortress itself, to the vampires within it, to the web of covenant magic that had lain dormant for centuries. She was, she realized, exactly what the council had declared, a queen. The thought should have been laughable. She was 24, a former hunter with dirt under her nails and calluses on her palms. Queens wore crowns and commanded kingdoms. But when she emerged from her chambers that evening, dressed in a gown of deep crimson that Draven had left for her, the vampires, they passed bowed, not in mockery, in genuine respect. They feel it, Draven explained, his hand at the small of her back as he guided her through corridors that now felt familiar rather than threatening. The covenant bond broadcasts to all vampire kind within range. They know you're under my protection, marked as my equal, sealed by magic older than any of them. And they just accept it? Most will. Some, like Cassius, will see it as a return to the old ways they despise, but those who remember the covenant times, who lived through the centuries of peace it provided, his silver eyes met hers. They've been waiting for this, hoping for it. You have no idea how many of my kind are exhausted by the endless conflict. They arrived at the Grand Council chamber, and Evangeline's breath caught. The vast space was filled with vampires, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, all dressed in finery that spanned centuries of fashion. The air hummed with power and anticipation. The 7 thrones stood as before, 6 occupied by the council members. The 7th, Draven's, waited empty. But beside it, a new throne had been placed. Carved from white marble veined with crimson, it gleamed in the candlelight like frozen blood. For her. I can't, Evangeline whispered. I'm not. You are. Draven's hand squeezed hers gently. You're the first covenant maker in 300 years, the first to complete a blood bond with a blood sovereign in 600, and you're mine, which means you're theirs as well. They need to see you. Need to understand what you represent. And what's that? Hope. Before she could respond, he led her forward. The assembled vampires parted like water, creating a clear path to the dais. Evangeline climbed it with trembling legs, feeling thousands of eyes tracking her every movement. Draven claimed his throne with the casual authority of centuries. Then he extended his hand to her, guiding her to the white marble seat beside him. She sat, and the bond flared with approval. The woman who'd spoken at Evangeline's first appearance, the one in the blood-red gown, rose from her throne. The covenant is complete, witnessed by magic if not by our eyes. The blood sovereign has claimed his queen. The first covenant maker in 3 centuries walks among us once more. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, some approving, some uncertain. I am Victoria, the woman continued, eldest of the council save for Draven himself, and I stand witness to this bonding. I, who remember the covenant times, who saw what peace such partnerships could achieve. She turned to Evangeline. Will you speak, covenant maker? Will you tell us what you intend for our kind? Evangeline's throat went dry. Every instinct screamed that she wasn't qualified for this, wasn't prepared, wasn't. You are, Draven's voice whispered through the bond. They don't need perfection. They need honesty. Give them that. She stood on shaking legs, gripping the arms of her throne. I was a hunter, she began, her voice carrying farther than it should have. I killed 17 of your kind before I was brought here. 17 vampires who preyed on innocence, who broke your laws, who gave truth to every nightmare mortals whisper about in the dark. The murmurs turned hostile, but she pressed on. I don't apologize for those kills. They were necessary. They were justice. She met the eyes of the nearest vampires, seeing anger, but also, surprisingly, respect. But I also learned that not all of you are monsters, that many of you are trying to coexist, to honor the old ways, to be more than hunger given form. I saw it in the blood memories. I felt it through the covenant bond. I understand now what my ancestors forgot, that you're no more uniformly evil than mortals are uniformly good. Pretty words, someone called from the assembly. But what will you do, Covenant Maker? How will you bridge the divide when your order still hunts us? Evangeline looked at Draven, who nodded encouragingly. I propose a return to the original Covenant model. Covenant Makers will serve as arbiters between mortal and vampire. We'll hunt those of your kind who break laws and terrorize innocents. Yes, because someone must. But we'll also protect those of you who honor the old ways. We'll mediate disputes. We'll create channels of communication so that both sides understand each other rather than simply fearing each other. And you believe mortals will accept this? Victoria asked. Accept working alongside the very creatures they've demonized for generations? No, Evangeline admitted. Not at first. It will take time, trust built slowly through action rather than words. But the alternative is endless war, and I've seen enough death to know that's not a future anyone should want. She speaks wisdom, a vampire from the crowd called, an older man with kind eyes. I remember the Covenant times, remember the peace it brought. If there's a chance to reclaim that. There are too few Covenant Makers, another argued. One woman cannot bridge centuries of hatred. Then we'll find others. Evangeline's voice strengthened with conviction. The gift runs in bloodlines. My ancestors hid it, but others may carry it dormant. We'll search for them, train them, build a network of bridges between our peoples. And who leads this network? Victoria's smile was knowing. Who coordinates these Covenant Makers, ensures they remain neutral rather than aligned with one side? The answer hung in the air, unspoken but obvious. Evangeline would. She looked at Draven, seeing pride and anxiety warring in his expression. Then she turned back to the assembly. I will, she said simply, if you'll accept me, if you'll trust a mortal, even a bonded one, to hold that responsibility. The chamber erupted into debate. Some vampires objected immediately, arguing that no mortal could understand their needs. Others defended her, pointing to the covenant bond as proof of her commitment. The noise built until it became overwhelming. Draven rose and silence fell instantly. The covenant bond isn't just symbolic, he said, his voice resonating with power. It grants Evangeline access to vampire law, vampire history, vampire understanding. She feels what I feel, knows what I know. Filtered through her mortal perspective, yes, but comprehensive nonetheless. She's more qualified to lead this initiative than anyone save the council itself. And you trust her? Someone challenged. Trust that she won't use this position to betray us? I trust her with my immortal existence. Draven's silver eyes found Evangeline's across the space, and his next words rang with absolute certainty. I trust her with everything I am, and I will stand beside her as she rebuilds what centuries of fear destroyed. Anyone who questions her questions me. Anyone who threatens her threatens the Blood Sovereign himself. The threat was clear and effective. Victoria smiled, something approving in her expression. Then it seems we have our answer. The Covenant Maker, the Queen of Eternal Night, will lead the effort to restore peace between our peoples. May she succeed where generations before her failed. She raised a goblet, filled with what was unmistakably blood, in salute. To Evangeline Ashford, first of her name in 3 centuries, bonded to the Blood Sovereign, bridge between worlds. May she walk in twilight eternal. May she walk in twilight eternal, the assembly echoed. And just like that, Evangeline's life changed irrevocably. The gathering dispersed gradually, vampires approaching to offer formal greetings or veiled warnings. Evangeline handled each interaction with more grace than she felt. The covenant bond feeding her information about each vampire's history, allegiances, and intentions. It was exhausting and exhilarating. Finally, as dawn approached and the last vampires departed, she found herself alone with Draven in the emptying chamber. That was... She couldn't find words. Overwhelming? He moved to her side, offering his hand. Welcome to immortal politics. It only gets more complex from here. Comforting. But she took his hand anyway, letting him pull her close. Did I do all right? You were magnificent. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, the gesture achingly tender. Honest, strong, visionary. Everything I hoped and nothing I dared expect. I'm terrified I'll fail them. Fail you. Then we'll fail together. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. The covenant bond means you're not alone in this. Not anymore. Whatever challenges come, we'll face them together. Together, she echoed. I'm still getting used to that word applying to us. We have time. His smile turned wicked. Well, I have eternity. You have a significantly extended lifetime. Either way, plenty of time to grow accustomed. She laughed despite the exhaustion pulling at her. Take me somewhere quiet, please, somewhere I can just be. Evangeline for a while, not the covenant maker or the queen or whatever else they're going to call me. I know just the place. He led her not to his chambers, but to a part of the fortress she hadn't yet explored. Ancient battlements that overlooked the surrounding wilderness. The view was breathtaking. Forest stretching to the horizon under a sky beginning to lighten with approaching dawn. I come here when the weight gets too heavy, Draven admitted, leaning against the stone parapet. When being the blood sovereign, the first turned, the eldest among us feels like too much to carry alone. You're not alone anymore, Evangeline said, joining him at the wall. No. He pulled her against his side, sharing his unnatural warmth in the pre-dawn chill. I'm not. And that's perhaps the most profound gift you've given me. Not the covenant bond, not the hope of peace, but simply presence. Someone to share the weight with. They stood in companionable silence, watching the sky shift from black to deep blue to the first hints of gold. You should retreat before the sun rises, Evangeline said softly. Soon. But he didn't move, seemingly reluctant to leave her side. These are my favorite moments. The threshold between night and day, when I can almost imagine being human again. Do you miss it? Being human? He considered the question seriously. I miss the simplicity of it, the certainty of mortality, that your time is limited, so each moment holds weight. As an immortal, I have infinite tomorrows, which sometimes makes today feel less urgent. His silver eyes found hers. But you've changed that. Reminded me that even infinite tomorrows are meaningless if you face them alone. Evangeline's chest tightened with emotions too complex to name. I love you, she whispered. I know I said it during the ceremony, but I want you to hear it again. Without ritual, without magic influencing it. Just truth. Draven turned to her, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Then let me return that truth. I love you, Evangeline. Beyond the bond, beyond the covenant, beyond duty or prophecy, I love you, flawed and fierce and perfectly mortal. And I will spend your lifetime proving that every day. They came together in a kiss that tasted of dawn and promises, of blood and forever, of two impossible beings who'd somehow found each other across an abyss of fear and hatred. When they finally parted, the sun was a golden line on the horizon. Go, Evangeline urged, before you burn. Worth it, he murmured against her lips, but he retreated anyway, stepping back into the shadows that would carry him to safety. Evangeline remained on the battlements, watching the sunrise alone, but not lonely. The covenant bond hummed with Draven's presence even across distance, a constant reassurance that she was valued, protected, chosen. Somewhere beyond these walls, the Eastern Covens plotted rebellion. Somewhere in the mortal world, her former order hunted vampires without understanding the complexity beneath the monsters. Somewhere in the future, impossible challenges waited. But for this moment, as dawn broke over the fortress that was now her home, Evangeline let herself simply exist, simply feel the transformation she'd undergone. from hunter to bridge, from mortal to something between, from Evangeline Ashford to the Queen of Eternal Night. And she smiled, because for the first time in her life, she knew exactly where she belonged. Chapter 9. Blood and Fire. The peace lasted exactly 11 days. Evangeline was in the fortress library, deep in research about historical covenant-maker techniques, when the alarm bells shattered the evening quiet. Not the wailing she'd heard before, but something worse. A deep, resonant tolling that made her bones ache. Draven materialized beside her instantly, his expression carved from stone. Cassius has made his move. He's brought an army. How many? 200 vampires, all from the Eastern Covens, all fed to full strength and thirsting for blood. His silver eyes met hers, and she saw genuine fear there for the first time. This is war, Evangeline. True war, not just skirmishes. Are you ready for that? Was she? She'd killed vampires before, but 17 deaths versus 200. You're not the same person you were then, she reminded herself. You're a covenant maker now. You have power. What do you need me to do? Relief flashed across Draven's face. The covenant bond makes you a beacon to all vampire kind. You can use that. Broadcast commands through it, compel the younger ones to stand down, even disrupt enemy coordination if you're strong enough. He gripped her shoulders. But Evangeline, using that kind of power will hurt. Will burn through you like fire. I don't want to ask this of you, but you're not asking. I'm offering. She covered his hands with hers. We're in this together, remember? So tell me how to fight. What followed was the fastest combat training of Evangeline's life. Draven showed her how to reach through the covenant bond, how to push her will outward like a wave, how to distinguish between allied vampires and hostile ones. Your gift doesn't work on me, he explained, because I'm your bonded partner. But every other vampire you encounter will feel you like pressure on their consciousness. The young ones will be unable to resist. The old ones, he grimaced, they'll resist, and it will cost you dearly to break through their defenses. And Cassius, leave him to me. He's too old, too powerful for you to compel even at your strongest. Draven's expression turned predatory. This has been building for centuries. He's always resented my leadership, always believed the old ways of terror and domination were superior. It's time to end it. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Victoria burst through the door, her blood-red gown replaced by battle leathers. They've breached the outer walls. We're holding the inner. Defenses, but Cassius has brought siege magic. Ancient stuff. Pre-Covenant era. The wards are weakening. How long until they fall? An hour, maybe less. Draven cursed eloquently in a language Evangeline didn't recognize. Gather the council. We make our stand in the Grand Hall. And Victoria? His voice dropped to something deadly soft. Signal the mortal villages under our protection. Tell them to bar their doors and hide their children. If we fall here, Cassius won't stop with vampires. Victoria paled. Impressive for a creature already corpse-white. He wouldn't. Even he must know that slaughtering mortals would bring every hunter organization down on vampire kind. He doesn't care. He wants the old days back, when mortals were cattle and vampires were apex predators. He'll burn the world to achieve it. The enormity of what they face settled over Evangeline like a shroud. This wasn't just about her or Draven or even the Covenant. This was about preventing a return to the Dark Ages for both species. Then we don't let him win, she said simply. They gathered in the Grand Hall, all 6 council members, 30 elite vampire warriors, and Evangeline. Against 200 attackers, the odds were devastating. But as Draven positioned his forces, as battle plans were drawn and last-minute preparations made, Evangeline felt the Covenant bond flare with confidence. We've survived worse. We'll survive this. The inner wards shattered with a sound like thunder. Cassius's forces poured through the breach like a dark tide, led by the ancient vampire himself. He was beautiful in that terrible way all old vampires were. Face like a fallen angel, eyes burning with coal-red fire, presence that radiated menace and magnetic charisma in equal measure. Blood Sovereign, his voice echoed through the hall. Your time is ended. The Covenant is a relic, your bonded mortal a weakness. Surrender her to us, and I'll grant you the mercy of quick death." Draven stepped forward, and the temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You've always been a fool, Cassius. Power without honor, strength without purpose. I offered you a place in the new world we're building. You chose war instead. I chose freedom. Freedom from the chains of mortal sympathy, from the weakness of caring about prey animals, from the illusion that we're anything other than apex predators." Cassius gestured to his assembled forces. "These vampires remember what we once were, what we could be again, without your sentimental restrictions. They remember tyranny," Evangeline called out, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. "They remember the hunts that nearly exterminated your kind. They remember mortality learning to fight back when you push too far." Cassius's gaze snapped to her, and the hatred there made her breath catch. "The little mortal speaks. Tell me, Covenant Maker, do you truly believe you can change 800 years of hunting with pretty words and blood bonds? You're a curiosity, nothing more. A novelty that will pass." "Then why bring an army to stop a novelty?" She stepped up beside Draven, letting the Covenant bond flare visibly, power rippling between them like visible lightning. "You're not afraid of me. You're afraid of what I represent, that there's another way, that the Covenant could return and end your reign of terror before it begins. Enough talk." Cassius's fangs extended fully. "Take them." The battle that followed was unlike anything Evangeline had ever witnessed. Vampires moved at speeds that blurred vision, clashed with impacts that cracked stone, fought with a viciousness born of centuries of accumulated rage. Blood sprayed, dark immortal blood that sizzled where it hit the floor, and ash filled the air as younger vampires fell to blessed weapons. Draven fought like living death, his sword cutting through attackers with 800 years of skill behind every strike. Victoria and the Council formed a protective circle around Evangeline, buying her time to do what they needed most. She reached through the Covenant bond and pushed. The power that flooded out of her was agony and ecstasy combined. She felt every vampire in the hall, felt their hunger, their loyalty, their doubt. And she spoke to that doubt. Why fight for Cassius? Why die for his ambition? The Covenant offers protection, purpose, peace. Lay down your arms. Choose life over pointless war. 30 vampires in Cassius's forces faltered. 15 dropped their weapons entirely, the compulsion too strong to resist. The tide of battle shifted. But the effort nearly broke Evangeline. She gasped, feeling blood trickle from her nose, the Covenant bond burning through her like acid. Too much. Draven's voice resonated through the connection. "You're burning yourself out." "Keep fighting," she threw back. "I can handle this." She pushed again, harder this time, targeting the vampires actively engaged with Draven's forces. 40 more faltered. The hall descended into chaos as Cassius's army began to fracture. "Enough!" Cassius's roar shook the foundations. He moved faster than thought, bypassing Draven's warriors, heading straight for Evangeline with death in his eyes. Victoria threw herself in his path, but he swept her aside like paper. The other council members fared no better. In seconds, he'd carved through every defense, his claws aimed at Evangeline's throat. Draven intercepted him mid-strike. The two ancient vampires clashed with an impact that shattered windows and cracked the marble floor. They moved too fast for mortal eyes to track, a whirlwind of violence and power. But Cassius was fresh, well-fed, and backed by rage. Draven had been managing a fortress, mediating disputes, spreading his attention thin. He was fast, skilled, deadly, but not quite fast enough. Cassius's claws tore through Draven's defenses and buried themselves in his chest. Evangeline screamed, feeling the agony through the bond, feeling Draven's life force draining, feeling the ancient vampire's strength beginning to fail. No! She didn't think, didn't plan, just acted. Power exploded out of her in a wave that sent every vampire in the hall to their knees. The Covenant bond didn't just connect her to Draven. It connected her to the ancient magic that had created the Covenant bonds in the first place. The magic that predated vampire law, that predated the conflicts, that remembered when mortals and immortals walked together. And she called on that magic now, channeling it through her mortal form even though it felt like being burned alive from the inside out. Stop. All of you. Stop. This war ends now. The compulsion crashed over 200 vampires simultaneously. The young ones collapsed, unable to resist. The older ones fought, but even they froze, paralyzed by magic older and stronger than their individual wills. Cassius staggered, his claws pulling free of Draven's chest. What have you? I am a covenant maker, Evangeline gasped, blood now pouring from her nose, her ears, her eyes, as the magic ravaged her mortal flesh. And I invoke the right of judgment. Cassius of the Eastern Covens, you are guilty of breaking covenant law, of rebellion against the blood sovereign, of attempting to murder a bonded covenant maker. Do you deny these charges? Cassius tried to move, tried to fight the compulsion, but the ancient magic held him frozen. I deny nothing. Then I sentence you to the mercy of sunrise. Her voice was failing, her vision darkening. Tomorrow morning, you will face the sun without shelter, and your death will serve as warning to any who would break covenant law. You cannot. I already have. Evangeline collapsed, the last of her strength exhausted. The compulsion released, but the damage was done. Every vampire in the hall had felt the weight of covenant magic, had understood that this mortal woman wielded power that transcended individual strength. Draven caught her before she hit the ground, his chest still bleeding but already beginning to heal. Evangeline, no, you've burned yourself out. Worth it, she whispered. You're alive. That's worth everything. Stubborn, impossible woman. But his voice broke. Don't you dare die. Don't you dare leave me after I've only just found you. Not dying. She managed a weak smile, just resting. So tired. Then rest. I have you. I've got you. He gathered her close, his cold strength the only thing keeping her conscious. Victoria, get a healer, now! The battle was over. Cassius's forces had either surrendered or fled. The rebellion was broken. But as Evangeline drifted toward unconsciousness in Draven's arms, she caught a glimpse of Cassius's expression, rage and fear and something else, respect. The covenant returns, he said softly. And perhaps that is as it should be. Then darkness claimed her, and she knew nothing more. Chapter 10. Dawn of the Covenant. Evangeline woke to the scent of jasmine and the feel of silk sheets against her skin. For a disoriented moment, she thought herself back in her first days at the fortress, confused, frightened, uncertain. Then memory returned in a rush. The battle, Cassius, the ancient magic she'd channeled through her mortal form. She should be dead. You very nearly were. She turned her head to find Draven sitting beside her bed, his face haggard despite his immortal nature. His chest was bandaged, unnecessary for a vampire, but perhaps symbolic, or perhaps the wounds had been deep enough that even immortal flesh needed help healing. How long? Her voice came out hoarse. 3 days. You burned yourself out so thoroughly that I feared... He stopped, jaw clenching. Victoria brought a healer, someone who understood covenant magic. She said you'd channeled power meant to be shared across generations of covenant makers. That you'd done alone what should have required a dozen trained practitioners. But I'm alive. Because you're bonded to me. The covenant connection fed you my immortal healing, kept your mortal form from collapsing entirely under the strain. His hand found hers, threading their fingers together. But Evangeline, you can never do that again. Promise me, whatever comes, whatever threats emerge, you don't channel that level of power alone. I promise. She squeezed his hand weakly. What happened after I collapsed? Cassius? Draven's expression turned grim. He was executed as you decreed. Faced the sunrise yesterday morning. His death was quick, merciful, considering his crimes. He paused. But his final words were unexpected. He said, Tell the covenant maker she was right. Tell her I died, understanding that strength without honor is just tyranny waiting to implode, and tell her to build something worth this sacrifice. Evangeline's eyes burned with unexpected tears. He changed his mind? I think watching you nearly kill yourself to stop a war, to save lives on both sides, showed him what true strength looked like. Not domination, but protection. Not fear, but respect. Draven's smile was bittersweet. Even monsters can learn. It just takes most of them dying to do it. How many did we lose? 43 vampires total. 27 of Cassius's forces, 16 of ours. His voice roughened. Including Marcus, one of the council members. He died protecting you when Cassius made his final charge. Grief tightened her chest. Marcus had been kind, one of the few who'd welcomed her without reservation. I'm sorry. He chose his death, would have considered it an honor to die protecting the first covenant maker in centuries. Draven lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. But his death can't be meaningless. We have to succeed, Evangeline. Have to build the peace he died defending. We will. The conviction in her voice surprised even her. What happened to Cassius's remaining forces? Most surrendered, accepted your judgment. They're currently being integrated into our territories under strict supervision. His silver eyes gleamed. But something remarkable happened. When word spread of what you'd done, how you'd stopped the battle, how you'd channeled covenant magic to prevent further bloodshed, vampires from across the continents began arriving, asking to speak with you, asking to understand the covenant. Evangeline sat up slowly, her body protesting but functional. How many? Last count, 300 vampires from 17 different territories, and, he paused, something like wonder crossing his face. 12 mortals claiming to carry covenant maker blood, descendants of families like yours, who'd hidden the gift for generations. They felt your power usage, felt the magic activate, and followed it here. 12? She could barely process it. But I thought I was the last. So did I. So did everyone. But it seems your bloodline wasn't the only one to survive the purges. The gift runs deeper than we knew. He helped her stand, supporting her weight as she found her balance. They're waiting in the council chamber, all of them, waiting to hear what you'll say, what you'll build, how you'll forge this impossible peace. The weight of expectation should have been crushing. Instead, Evangeline felt clarity settle over her like a mantle. This was what she'd been meant for. Not hunting, not killing, but bridging. Connecting two species who'd forgotten they could coexist. Help me dress, she said. Something that looks like a queen would wear it, but practical enough to work in. Draven's smile could have lit the night. I know just the thing. 20 minutes later, Evangeline stood before the council chamber doors, dressed in a gown of deep midnight blue, shot through with silver threads. Her dark hair was braided in an intricate crown, her grandmother's silver pendant, the one that had started all of this, resting against her throat. She looked every inch the queen of eternal night. Ready? Draven asked. No, but I'm going anyway. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Then he took her hand, and together they entered the chamber. The sight that greeted her was overwhelming. Hundreds of vampires filled the space, spanning ages from newly turned to ancient beyond reckoning. And scattered among them, 12 mortals who radiated the same latent power she'd felt awakening in herself. Covenant makers. All of them. The assembly fell silent as she and Draven crossed to the dais. But this time, when she climbed to her throne, she didn't feel like an imposter. She felt like she'd finally found where she belonged. 3 days ago, she began, her voice carrying through the vast space. I nearly died stopping a war. I channeled power I barely understood, violated every principle of safe magic practice, and generally acted like a reckless fool. Surprised laughter rippled through the assembly. But I'd do it again, because the alternative was watching people, mortal and immortal alike, die for a conflict that never needed to happen. We've spent centuries fighting each other, building hatred on foundations of fear and misunderstanding. and it ends now." She gestured to the 12 covenant makers scattered through the crowd. "You feel it, don't you? The pull of the gift. The ability to sense vampire magic, to walk between worlds, to bridge the impossible divide. Our ancestors had this gift, used it to forge peace that lasted centuries. Then that peace shattered, and we went into hiding. But hiding solves nothing. It just delays the inevitable confrontation." She straightened, letting conviction ring in her voice. "I propose we revive the Covenant Maker tradition properly, train those who carry the gift, create a formal organization dedicated to mediating between mortal and vampire, hunt those of both species who break laws or harm innocents, protect those who honor the old ways, and build, slowly but surely, a world where both can coexist." "It's impossible," someone called from the crowd. "Mortals will never accept it. Your order hunts us." "My order hunts monsters," Evangeline countered. "If you're not a monster, you have nothing to fear from properly trained covenant makers. And yes, convincing mortal hunter organizations will be difficult, but not impossible. Because we'll have proof, real, tangible proof, that peaceful coexistence works." "What proof?" The question came from one of the mortal covenant makers, a young woman with fire-red hair and suspicious eyes. "Us." Evangeline gestured between herself and Draven. "A bonded pair, a covenant maker and the blood sovereign, working together to enforce laws that protect both species. We'll be the living example. And as more covenant makers bond with vampire partners, as the network grows, the proof multiplies." "You ask much of us," Victoria said from her council seat. "Trust, when trust has been poisoned for so long. Restraint, when instinct screams for dominance. Change, when change feels like death." "I do," Evangeline agreed. "But I'm not asking for blind faith. I'm asking for a trial period. 1 year. Let the covenant makers operate, mediate disputes, hunt genuine threats. At the end of that year, if it's not working, if the conflicts have worsened rather than improved, we dissolve the program and return to the current state of Cold War." "And if it does work?" Draven asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Then we expand it, formalize it, make the Covenant Maker network permanent, with oversight from both vampire councils and mortal authorities. We create lasting peace, one mediated conflict at a time." The chamber erupted into debate, some supporting, some objecting, all of them passionate. Evangeline let it rage for several minutes before raising her hand for silence. "I'm not asking you to decide now. This is too important for snap judgments. Go back to your territories, discuss among yourselves, consult your covens, your councils, your mortal contacts, then return in 1 month with your answer." She met as many eyes as she could. "But know this. With or without your support, the Covenant Makers will operate. We'll hunt the monsters, protect the innocent, and build bridges wherever we can. The only question is whether you'll help us or hinder us." Slowly, deliberately, Victoria stood. "I vote to support this initiative. The Covenant times were the most peaceful centuries of my existence. I would see them return." She looked at the other council members. "Who stands with me?" One by one, 5 more vampires rose. The entire council, united in support. Then others stood. Dozens, then hundreds, until the entire assembly was on their feet. And in a gesture that brought tears to Evangeline's eyes, the 12 mortal covenant makers climbed the dais and knelt before her throne, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, in recognition that she'd paved the way for them, had proved the gift's worth, had given them a purpose. "Teach us," the red-haired woman said. "Show us how to be what our ancestors were, how to bridge the divide." "I will," Evangeline promised. "We all will, together." Draven's hand found hers, squeezing gently. And through the bond, she felt his pride, his love, his absolute certainty that they'd just changed the world. The gathering dispersed gradually, vampires returning to their territories to spread word of what had happened. The mortal covenant makers remained, eager to begin training. Plans were made, systems established, the framework of something unprecedented taking shape. As dawn approached and the last vampires retreated to their chambers, Evangeline found herself alone with Draven in their private sanctuary, the garden where he'd first offered her choice. "We did it," she whispered, still hardly believing it. "We actually started something. You started it." He pulled her close, his cold strength warming in her presence. "I just provided the platform, the vision, the courage, the impossible hope. That was all you. It was us, the bond, the covenant, proof that the impossible can work." They stood in the pre-dawn darkness, wrapped in each other, listening to the fountain's eternal song. And Evangeline thought about the journey that had brought her here, from hunter to hunted to something unprecedented, from enemy to equal to beloved. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now?" Draven's smile was visible even in darkness. "Now we build the world we promised. Train the covenant makers, mediate conflicts, hunt the genuine monsters, protect the innocent. We work until we can't work anymore, until your mortal span runs its course. And then? Then I mourn you for the remaining centuries of my existence." He touched her face gently. "And remember that, for one brilliant, impossible lifetime, I wasn't alone. That you gave me purpose beyond survival, that you loved me despite everything I am. I do love you." She rose on her toes, pressing a kiss to his cold lips. "Monster, protector, ancient thing, I love all of you. And I love you, huntress turned bridge, mortal turned queen." He returned the kiss with aching tenderness. "Thank you. For seeing past the fangs. For choosing me when you could have walked away. For believing we could be more than our natures demanded." The sun broke the horizon, flooding the garden with golden light. Draven hissed softly but didn't immediately retreat, stood in the painful radiance for a few precious seconds, letting it illuminate what they'd built together. Then he stepped back into shadow, and Evangeline followed him inside, back to their chambers, back to their shared existence. Outside, the world was changing. The covenant was returning, and at its center stood a mortal woman and an immortal man, bonded by blood and choice, proving that love could bridge even the darkest divides. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, conflicts, vampires, and mortals who refused to accept the new order. But they would face it together. Always together. Because that was what the covenant meant. Not chains, but partnership. Not prison, but freedom found through connection. Evangeline curled against Draven's cold strength as day claimed the world beyond their walls. And she smiled because she finally understood what her grandmother had tried to tell her all those years ago. The greatest strength, the old woman had whispered on her deathbed, isn't in standing alone. It's in finding those who complement your weaknesses and amplify your strengths. The covenant makers understood that. The world forgot. But maybe someday someone will remember. Evangeline had remembered. And now she'd ensure the world never forgot again. Epilogue, Twilight Eternal. 1 year later, Evangeline stood on the battlements where she'd once watched dawn break over an uncertain future and surveyed a world transformed. The Covenant Maker Network had grown to 43 active practitioners, mortals who carried the gift and had bonded with vampire partners, creating teams that operated across continents. They mediated disputes, hunted genuine threats on both sides, and slowly, painstakingly, rebuilt trust that had been shattered for centuries. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still vampires who resisted the new order, still mortals who saw all immortals as monsters. But the tide was turning. Hunter organizations had begun reaching out, cautiously interested in cooperation rather than extermination. Vampire covens that had operated in isolation for generations were opening channels of communication, and slowly the covenant principles were spreading, not through force, but through proof that they worked. Deep thoughts? Draven's voice came from behind her, accompanied by the familiar press of cold strength as he wrapped his arms around her waist. Just reflecting on how much has changed. She leaned into him, marveling as she always did that this was her life now. A year ago, I would have staked you without hesitation. Now I can't imagine existence without you. A year ago, I'd lived 800 years alone and convinced myself I preferred it. His lips brushed her temple. Now I wake each night grateful that you chose to stay. Chose me, despite everything. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over territories that no longer operated in constant fear. The covenant wasn't fully restored. Not yet, but the foundation was solid, and with each passing month, it grew stronger. Victoria sent word, Draven said eventually. The European covens have formally voted to adopt covenant law. That makes 17 territories now operating under the new system. 17 out of how many? 32, with significant vampire populations. His smile was audible in his voice. More than half. Your vision is becoming reality, my love. Our vision, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without... She stopped abruptly, her hand moving to her stomach, a flutter, subtle but unmistakable. Draven went absolutely still behind her. Evangeline? I think... She turned in his arms, meeting his silver eyes with wonder and trepidation. I think I'm pregnant. The silence stretched so long she started to worry. Then Draven's expression shattered into something between joy and terror. But that's... The healers said bonded covenant makers were infertile, that the magic prevents... Apparently the magic changed its mind. She pressed his hand to her stomach, where that subtle flutter had settled into warmth. I've suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be certain before telling you. A child. He seemed unable to process it. Our child, half mortal, half immortal, born of a covenant bond. His eyes found hers, blazing with intensity. Do you understand what this means? If a bonded pair can produce offspring, if the covenant magic allows it, then the covenant maker bloodlines don't have to remain dormant, don't have to hide and dwindle. Understanding bloomed. The gift could be passed directly through bonded families, could grow naturally, rather than relying on random dormant carriers. The covenant could be truly permanent. Wonder filled his voice. Not dependent on individual practitioners with limited lifespans, but growing, self-sustaining, expanding with each generation. They stared at each other, the magnitude of it settling over them like snow. A child, the first child born of a covenant maker and vampire in 6 centuries, proof that the bond created something more than partnership. It created legacy. I'm terrified, Evangeline admitted. What if I can't do this? What if the pregnancy doesn't survive? What if... Then we face it together. Draven pulled her close, his cold strength more comforting than any warmth. Every fear, every challenge, every impossible moment, we face it together, as we always have, as we always will. Far below, in the courtyard, she could see the newest class of covenant makers training. Mortals and vampires working side by side, learning to trust, learning to bridge, learning to build rather than destroy. And in that moment, Evangeline understood that this was what the ancient magic had wanted all along. Not just cooperation, not just peace, but genuine integration. Connection so deep it created new life, new possibilities, new hope. Twilight eternal, she whispered, echoing Victoria's toast from that first gathering. Twilight eternal, Draven agreed, where darkness and light meet, where mortal and immortal become something unprecedented, where you and I build a future worth the sacrifices it required. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, as the first calls of nocturnal creatures echoed through the forest, Evangeline rested her hand over the fragile new life growing within her, and made a silent vow. I will build you a world where vampires and mortals coexist, where your dual nature is celebrated, not feared, where you never have to choose between the light and the dark, because you'll understand that both are necessary. Both are beautiful. I will build you the world I found with your father, where impossible love bridges impossible divides, where hope survives even the longest darkness. I will build you a world of twilight eternal. Behind her, Draven's arms tightened possessively, protectively. And through the covenant bond, she felt his answering vow, promises made in blood and eternity, in cold strength and warm hope, in the space between mortal and immortal, where they'd carved out something unprecedented, something worth fighting for, something worth building, something worth every impossible choice that had brought them to this moment. The night deepened, but Evangeline didn't move. She stood on the battlements with her vampire lord, his cold hands covering hers, where they rested on their unborn child, and watched the stars come out one by one, each star a promise, each star a victory, each star proof that even in darkness, light endures. And in the perfect balance between the two, in the twilight eternal, miracles could happen. Love could bloom. And monsters could become the heroes of their own impossible stories.